Welcome. Take a moment to let yourself settle. Tonight, we're travelling to one of the most extreme places humans call home. The Sakha Republic, known as Yakutia, lies in the far east of Siberia. Here, winter is not just cold. It is a condition that reshapes everything: the air, the landscape, the rhythm of daily life. In regions like Oymyakon and Verkhoyansk, temperatures drop below 60 degrees. For 9 months of the year, families live in this cold. They work in it. They sleep in it. They have done so for generations. This is not a story of struggle or heroism. It is simply an account of how people rest in a place where rest requires careful preparation. How they build homes that hold warmth. How they tend fires that radiate heat through the night. How they layer clothing and arrange sleeping spaces to make it through until morning. Over the next while, we will move through one winter night in Yakutia. We will see how the cold arrives, how houses are sealed against it, and how families sleep safely in temperatures that would be fatal without these practices. So settle in, let the cold remain outside, and let the story unfold. In late November, the people of Yakutia mark a change in the season. They call it the arrival of the Jiloguha, the Bull of Winter. This is not simply a drop in temperature, it is the beginning of the deep freeze, a period that will last for months. The cold descends gradually at first, then rapidly. Within days, the thermometer falls past 40 degrees. Within weeks, it reaches 50 degrees and continues downward. In the coldest years, temperatures approach 70 degrees. The landscape transforms under this cold. Rivers freeze solid. Snow hardens into a surface that can support the weight of vehicles. The sky becomes clear and brittle, drained of moisture. During this time, the sun barely rises. In the depths of winter, daylight lasts only a few hours. The rest is darkness, long, still, and quiet. The air itself feels different. It is dry, almost devoid of humidity. When you breathe, the moisture in your lungs meets the exterior cold and freezes instantly. This creates a faint sound, a soft tinkling, as tiny ice crystals form and fall. Locals call this the whisper of stars. The phenomenon occurs only at the coldest temperatures, below 50 degrees C. Each exhalation releases a small cloud of vapour that crystallizes mid-air. The crystals are too small to see individually, but together they make a sound like wind chimes, distant and fragile. It is one of the markers that the deep freeze has fully arrived. The cold at this level is not painful in the way people from warmer climates might expect. It does not sting or burn immediately. Instead, it drains. It pulls heat from the body steadily, relentlessly. Exposed skin begins to freeze within minutes. Metal tools become dangerous to touch without gloves. Even breathing requires care. Inhaling too quickly can damage the lungs. In Yakutia, this cold is not an emergency. It is the baseline condition of winter. People do not panic or retreat indoors indefinitely. They adapt. They dress in layers of fur and hide. They move with deliberate slowness to avoid sweating, which can freeze against the skin. They time their outdoor activities to the brief hours of daylight and minimize exposure after dark. But the night is when the real challenge begins. During the day, there is some movement, some activity to generate warmth. At night, the body is still. The metabolic rate drops. Core temperature becomes harder to maintain. This is when the architecture of survival becomes essential. The balagan, the traditional Yakut winter house, is designed specifically for this challenge. It is not a shelter in the general sense. It is a thermal system, engineered over generations to address one fundamental problem: how to keep a human body warm through a night when the exterior temperature is more than 80 degrees colder than the interior. The temperature gradient between inside and outside is extreme. A family might maintain an indoor temperature of 120°, while the air just beyond the wall sits at 60 degrees. This difference creates constant pressure on every joint, every seal, every surface of the house. Heat wants to escape. Cold wants to enter. The house must resist both continuously for months. The challenge is not generating heat. Fire can do that. The challenge is capturing the heat, holding it, and releasing it slowly. This requires mass. It requires insulation. It requires an understanding of how heat moves through materials and air. The Yakut people developed this understanding through necessity. There were no textbooks, no engineering manuals. There was trial, error, observation, and the slow accumulation of knowledge passed from one generation to the next. What worked was remembered. What failed was adjusted. Over centuries, this process produced a dwelling that functions as a kind of battery, charging during the day, discharging through the night. The balagan is built low and compact. Its walls slope inward, creating a shape like a truncated pyramid. This is not aesthetic. It is functional. The sloping walls reduce the surface area exposed to the sky, where heat radiates away most easily. They also deflect wind, guiding it over the structure rather than pressing against flat surfaces. The roof is similarly designed. It is not flat but angled, covered in layers of earth and sod that provide additional insulation. In winter, snow accumulates on top, adding another layer. Snow is an excellent insulator. It traps air in its structure, creating millions of tiny pockets that resist heat transfer. The house sits on the permafrost, ground that remains frozen year-round. This presents a problem. If the house generates too much heat, the permafrost beneath it can begin to thaw. Thawing permafrost becomes unstable. The ground shifts. Foundations crack. To prevent this, traditional balagani are built on short stilts or platforms that allow cold air to circulate beneath the floor, keeping the permafrost frozen. Inside, the layout is simple. There is one main room, sometimes two. The entrance is small, often requiring a person to stoop. This minimises the opening through which cold air can enter. In some designs, the entrance includes a kind of vestibule or airlock, a small chamber that serves as a buffer between the interior and exterior. The floor is made of wooden planks, sometimes covered with animal hides or woven mats. The walls are heavy logs, fitted tightly together. Between the logs, every gap must be sealed. This is where the real work begins. The cold does not announce itself. It finds the smallest opening and enters, a crack between logs, a gap around a window frame, a loose joint at the roofline. Once inside, the cold spreads, pulling warmth from the air and the bodies of the inhabitants. Sealing the house is not done once. It is an ongoing process, repeated every autumn as temperatures begin to drop. Families inspect every joint, every seam. They look for places where previous sealants have dried or fallen away. They look for new cracks that have formed as the wood expands and contracts with the seasons. The work is methodical. It is not rushed. Each seal must be done properly because a failed seal means wasted heat, and wasted heat means more firewood must be burned, and firewood is a limited resource in a landscape where trees grow slowly. The night is coming. The deep freeze is here, and the house must be ready. The preparation of the balagan for winter begins weeks before the coldest temperatures arrive. Families know the signs. The air grows sharper. The first hard frosts settle over the ground. Rivers begin to freeze at their edges. This is the signal to begin sealing the house. The primary material used for sealing is oakum. This is a fibrous substance made from hemp or flax. It comes in long, loose strands that can be twisted and packed into narrow spaces. The process is simple but labour-intensive. Each gap between the horizontal logs must be filled. The person doing the work takes a length of oakum and presses it into the seam with a flat tool, often a wooden wedge or a blunt chisel. The oakum is hammered in, compacted, until it fills the space completely. The goal is to create a continuous barrier that prevents air from moving through the wall. This is not insulation in the modern sense. Oakum does not trap heat. It blocks airflow. In extreme cold, even a small draft can lower the interior temperature significantly. A single unsealed joint can create a cold spot, a place where frost forms on the interior wall. These cold spots are dangerous. They indicate a failure in the thermal boundary. Once the oakum is in place, the next step is the application of plaster. This is where the process becomes more specialised. The plaster used in Yakutia is not made from lime or gypsum. It is made from mud mixed with cow dung. To those unfamiliar with the practice, this may seem crude. It is not. Cow dung has specific properties that make it ideal for this purpose. When dried, it forms a hard, durable surface. It adheres well to wood. It does not crack easily under temperature fluctuations, and it provides thermal mass, a quality that becomes essential during the long night. The mixture is prepared by combining fresh cow dung with clay-rich mud and sometimes straw. The straw adds structural integrity, preventing the plaster from crumbling as it dries. The consistency is thick, like wet cement. It can be applied by hand or with a flat tool, spread evenly over the oakum and the gaps between logs. As the plaster dries, it forms a seal that is both airtight and hygroscopic. Hygroscopic means it can absorb and release moisture. This is critical in the Yakut winter. The air inside the balagan is warmed by the fire and by the bodies of the inhabitants. Warm air holds more moisture than cold air. When people breathe, they release water vapour. When they cook, they release steam. This moisture must be managed. If the interior air becomes too humid, condensation forms on cold surfaces. In extreme cold, this condensation freezes, creating ice on the walls and ceiling. Ice inside the house is a problem. It reduces insulation. It creates additional cold spots. And when temperatures rise slightly, the ice melts, soaking the walls and creating conditions for rot. The cow dung plaster prevents this. It absorbs excess moisture from the air during the night when humidity is highest. During the day, when the stove is fired and the air becomes drier, the plaster releases the moisture slowly. This buffering effect keeps the interior environment stable. Research into traditional building materials has confirmed this. Cow dung plaster can reduce temperature fluctuations inside a structure by up to 10 degrees C. It is not passive, it is active, responding to changes in the environment and moderating them. The exterior of the balagan is also treated. Once winter fully arrives and snow begins to accumulate, some families add another layer of insulation by packing snow against the base of the walls. Snow, when compacted, becomes dense and still. It does not allow air to move through it. This creates a barrier that reduces heat loss through the foundation. In the deepest cold, another phenomenon occurs. The exterior surfaces of the house develop a glaze of ice. This happens naturally. Moisture from inside the house, despite the plaster and the oakum, slowly migrates outward through the wood. When it reaches the exterior surface, it freezes instantly. Over time, this creates a thin, continuous layer of ice that coats the outside of the logs. This ice layer is beneficial. It acts as an additional seal, filling microscopic gaps in the wood grain and creating a smooth, impermeable surface. The house becomes encased. It is hermetic, locked against the outside air. But the windows present a different challenge. Glass, while transparent, is a poor insulator. In extreme cold, glass can crack. The thermal stress of a large temperature difference between interior and exterior is too much for the material. A single-pane window at 60 degrees is almost useless. It conducts heat out of the house rapidly, creating a cold draft that spills down the wall and across the floor. The Yakut solution is to replace glass with ice. This is not a compromise. It is an intentional choice based on the specific properties of ice in extreme cold. Clear ice is harvested from rivers or lakes in late autumn, before the surface becomes clouded with snow and impurities. The ice must be transparent, like glass. Families cut blocks several inches thick, sometimes as much as 10 or 15 centimetres. These blocks are shaped to fit the window frames and installed in place of glass panes. The ice windows function on a principle called cryogenic equilibrium. The exterior cold keeps the ice frozen. The interior warmth cannot pass through. The thickness of the ice quickly enough to melt it. The result is a stable barrier that allows light to enter while preventing heat from escaping. The light that comes through ice windows is soft, diffused, slightly blue. It is enough to illuminate the interior during the brief daylight hours. At night, when there is no light outside, the ice becomes opaque, a pale surface that reflects the glow of the fire. The thickness of the ice is critical. Too thin, and the interior warmth will begin to melt the inner surface, creating a layer of water that refreezes unevenly. Too thick, and no light can pass through. The optimal thickness is found through experience. Each family knows the right measure for their climate, their house, their specific latitude. Some families reinforce the ice windows with a second layer, creating a double pane with an air gap between. This air gap provides additional insulation, the same principle used in modern double-glazed windows. The air, trapped and still, resists heat transfer. By the time the deep freeze is fully established, the house is sealed. Every joint has been packed, every surface has been plastered, the windows are ice, the roof is layered with sodden snow, the exterior walls wear their glaze of frozen moisture. The balagan is no longer just a structure. It is a closed system, a carefully maintained environment separated from the hostile exterior by multiple barriers. It is ready for the night. At the centre of the balagan stands the pechka. In Russian, the word simply means stove, but this does not capture what the object actually is. The pechka is not a metal box. It is a construction of brick and clay, a massive piece of architecture built into the house itself. A traditional pechka can weigh 2 tons. Some are larger. The mass is intentional, the weight is functional. This is not a device for cooking alone. It is a thermal battery, designed to absorb the intense energy of a fire and release it slowly over many hours. The structure is built on a solid foundation, separate from the wooden floor of the house. The base is often stone or compacted earth, strong enough to support the weight without settling. On this foundation, layers of brick are laid, cemented together with clay mortar. The bricks themselves are made from local clay fired in kilns. They are dense, heavy, capable of withstanding high temperatures without cracking. Each brick is placed with care. The walls of the firebox must be thick enough to contain the heat without radiating it too quickly. The flues, the internal passages that channel smoke and hot gases, must be positioned precisely to maximize contact between the heat and the masonry. Inside the pechka, the design is complex. The firebox is where the wood burns. Above and around the firebox, a series of channels guide the hot gases through the body of the stove. These channels do not lead directly to the chimney. Instead, they wind through the masonry in a deliberate path, sometimes doubling back, sometimes spiralling upward. This labyrinth serves a single purpose: to force the heat to surrender itself to the brick and clay. Hot gases enter the channels at several hundred degrees. As they move through the narrow passages, they transfer their energy to the surrounding material. By the time the gases reach the chimney, they have cooled significantly. Most of their heat has been absorbed. The efficiency of this design is high. A well-built pechka can capture 80 to 90% of the energy produced by burning wood. In a conventional metal stove, much of the heat escapes immediately up the chimney. The pechka prevents this. It holds the heat, stores it as physical warmth in tons of masonry. The firebox is loaded with wood twice a day under normal conditions. In the coldest months, it may be loaded 3 times. The timing of these firings is important. The morning fire warms the house after the cold of the night. The evening fire, lit in the late afternoon, prepares the stove for the long darkness ahead. The evening firing is the most critical. This is the fire that must carry the family through the night. The process begins hours before sleep. Wood is stacked in the firebox, arranged to burn evenly. The type of wood matters. Hardwoods like birch burn slowly and produce sustained heat. Softwoods like pine ignite easily but burn quickly. A mixture is often used. Pine for kindling, birch for the main fuel. The fire is lit and tended carefully. The goal is not to create a roaring blaze, but a steady, controlled burn. Too much air and the wood burns too fast, releasing heat that escapes before the masonry can absorb it. Too little air, and the fire smoulders, producing smoke and carbon monoxide without sufficient heat. The person tending the fire, often the eldest member of the household, monitors the flame, adjusts the air intake, adds wood as needed. This is skilled work. It requires an understanding of combustion, an ability to read, the colour and movement of the flame, and a sense of timing developed over years. As the wood burns down, it transforms. Solid logs become glowing coals, then ash. The coals radiate intense heat, much of it in the infrared spectrum. This is the heat that the masonry absorbs most efficiently. The bricks and clay surrounding the firebox reach temperatures well above 100 degrees Celsius. In some areas, close to the firebox, the temperature may exceed 200 degrees Celsius. This heat does not stay in one place. it begins to migrate through the mass of the stove. The principles of thermodynamics govern this movement. Heat flows from areas of higher temperature to areas of lower temperature. The hot core of the stove radiates outward, warming the surrounding bricks, which in turn warm the outer layers, which eventually warm the surface that faces the room. The outer surface of the pechka is warm to the touch, but not dangerously so. In a well-designed stove, the surface temperature ranges between 38 degrees and 54 degrees. This is hot enough to radiate significant warmth into the room, but not so hot that it causes burns. This moderation is achieved through design, the placement of internal channels, the thickness of the walls, and sometimes the inclusion of a layer of sand or small pebbles between the hottest flues and the outer surface. The sand layer acts as a buffer. It absorbs some of the heat, distributing it more evenly. It prevents localized hotspots that could crack the exterior brick or make the surface unsafe to touch. Some pechkas include this feature, others rely solely on the thickness of the masonry. By the time the family prepares for sleep, the fire is burned down to embers. The firebox contains glowing coals and a bed of fine ash. At this point, the damper is adjusted. The damper is a metal plate or door that controls airflow through the chimney. When the fire is burning, the damper is open, allowing smoke and gases to escape. When the fire has consumed most of its fuel, the damper is closed. Closing the damper is a precise operation. It must be done at the right moment. Too early, and carbon monoxide, a colourless, odourless gas produced during incomplete combustion, can accumulate in the room. Carbon monoxide is lethal. It binds to hemoglobin in the blood more readily than oxygen, causing asphyxiation. Too late, and heat escapes up the chimney, wasted. The person tending the fire waits until the coals have burned down to a stable glow. They watch the colour. Red coals still produce carbon monoxide. White or grey coals have burned more completely. They listen to the fire. A crackling active sound indicates ongoing combustion. A quiet, steady glow indicates the transition to the ember stage. When the moment is right, the damper is closed. The chimney is sealed. The heat trapped in the masonry has nowhere to go but into the room. From this point, the pechka becomes passive. It does not generate new heat. It radiates the heat it has already absorbed. The surface continues to warm the air. The air circulates slowly through the room, rising as it warms, descending as it cools, creating a gentle convective current. The rate of heat loss from the pechka is slow. The mass of the brick and clay resists change. It took hours to heat the stove. It will take hours for it to cool. During a winter night in Yakutia, which can last 12 to 14 hours, the pechka provides continuous warmth. In some balagani, the pechka is positioned in the centre of the room. This allows heat to radiate in all directions. In others, it is built against a wall, with one side facing the main living space, and the other side facing an adjacent room, or the Khoton, the cattle barn. This arrangement allows the stove to heat multiple spaces simultaneously. The top of the pechka is flat, and this surface serves another function. It becomes a sleeping platform. The top of the stove, called the palati, is the warmest place in the house. It is reserved for those who need it. Most, elderly family members, young children, or anyone recovering from illness. Sleeping on the palati is not uncomfortable. The surface is warm, not hot. A layer of sand or pebbles beneath the top bricks distributes the heat evenly, preventing burns. A blanket or mat provides cushioning. The warmth radiates upward, directly into the body of the sleeper. For the rest of the family, sleeping platforms called oron are arranged along the walls. These platforms are elevated off the floor, which is the coldest part of the room. Cold air is denser than warm air. It sinks. The floor, despite the stove, remains significantly cooler than the air at chest height. The oron closest to the pechka receive the most radiant heat. These positions are given to the heads of the household, the elders, those whose metabolic rate may be lower and who need additional warmth. Younger members of the family sleep further from the stove. They are still within the warm zone, the volume of air heated by the pechka, but at a slightly lower temperature. This arrangement is not arbitrary. It reflects both social hierarchy and practical thermodynamics. Heat distribution in a room is not uniform. There are gradients, zones of greater and lesser warmth. The Yakut people understand these gradients. They position themselves within them according to need. The pechka does more than warm the room. It provides a focal point, a rhythm, a structure to the day. The morning fire signals the beginning of activity. The evening fire signals the transition to rest. The presence of the stove, massive and constant, is reassuring. It is the heart of the house, both literally and symbolically. And through the night, as the family sleeps, the stove continues its work. It radiates. It releases the energy stored in its mass. It keeps the interior temperature stable. It holds back the cold. Outside, the temperature may be 60 degrees. Inside, wrapped in the warmth of 2 tons of heated brick, the air remains breathable, survivable, safe. When the family retreats from the stove to their sleeping platforms, they do not rely on the heat of the pechka alone. The air in the room is warm, but the night is long. The body, at rest, generates less heat than during activity. Core temperature must be maintained. This requires insulation, layers between the body and the surrounding air. The Yakut people have refined this insulation over generations. They use materials provided by the animals they live alongside: reindeer, horses, cattle. Each material has specific properties. Each serves a particular function. Together, they form a system as carefully engineered as the house itself. Reindeer fur is the primary material. Reindeer are native to the subarctic. They have adapted to extreme cold through evolutionary processes that shape their biology. The fur of a reindeer is unlike the hair of most mammals. Each individual strand is hollow, containing a core of air. This hollow structure is the key to the fur's insulating power. Air is a poor conductor of heat. When trapped in small, isolated pockets, it resists the transfer of thermal energy. A single reindeer hair acts as a tiny thermos, holding warmth close to the skin and preventing it from radiating away. A reindeer hide contains thousands of these hairs, densely packed. When a person wraps themselves in reindeer fur, they are surrounding their body with millions of air pockets, each one contributing to the total insulation. The effect is cumulative. The thicker the fur, the greater the resistance to heat loss. Reindeer hides are used in multiple forms. The base layer, worn directly against the skin, is made from the hide of young reindeer, called fawns. Fawn hide is softer, more supple. It moves with the body without chafing. It wicks moisture away from the skin, preventing the accumulation of sweat that would otherwise freeze in the cold. This base layer is called the istangas. It covers the torso and sometimes the limbs. It is worn inside out, with the fur against the skin. This maximizes contact between the hollow hairs and the body, trapping warmth in the layer of air immediately surrounding the skin. Over the istangas, a middle layer is added. This layer is often made from wool or suede. Wool, like reindeer fur, has insulating properties. The fibers are crimped, creating spaces that trap air. Suede, being denser, provides a windbreak, preventing the movement of air through the layers. The outer layer, called the tangas, is made from the hide of adult reindeer, or in some cases bear. This layer is thicker, heavier. The fur is longer and coarser. It serves as the primary barrier against the exterior environment. If a person must go outside during the night, this is the layer that faces the cold. Each layer is constructed with care. Seams are sewn with sinew, which is strong and does not rot. The stitching is tight, leaving no gaps where cold air can penetrate. In some garments, the seams are double-stitched or reinforced with additional strips of hide. The extremities require special attention. The hands and feet are the most vulnerable parts of the body. They are farthest from the core where heat is generated. Blood flow to the extremities decreases in cold conditions as the body prioritizes maintaining the temperature of vital organs. This makes fingers and toes susceptible to frostbite. Footwear in Yakutia is specialized. The traditional boots, called unti, are made from the hide of reindeer legs. The fur on a reindeer's legs is different from the fur on its body. It is shorter, denser, more tightly packed. This adaptation allows the reindeer to walk on frozen ground without losing heat through its hooves. The Yakut people recognized this property and used it. Unti are constructed from leg hide, with the fur facing outward. The boots are tall, reaching to the knee or higher. They are loose-fitting, allowing for thick insoles made from grass or fur. The looseness is intentional. Tight boots restrict circulation. Restricted circulation accelerates heat loss. Inside the untee, layers of dried grass or shredded bark are often placed. These materials provide additional insulation and absorb moisture from the feet. Keeping the feet dry is essential. Wet skin loses heat much faster than dry skin. If the feet become damp and the moisture freezes, frostbite can occur within minutes. Hands are protected with mittens rather than gloves. Mittens are more effective in extreme cold. Gloves separate the fingers, isolating them and reducing the shared warmth they provide each other. Mittens keep the fingers together, allowing them to share heat. The Yakut mittens, called tuluk, are made from reindeer hide or horsehair. Some are lined with additional fur. Some include a separate inner mitten, creating a layered system similar to the clothing. The outer surface may be adorned with embroidery or small pieces of silver. These adornments are not purely decorative. They carry cultural and spiritual significance, believed to protect the wearer from harmful forces. Headwear is equally important. A significant portion of body heat is lost through the head. The scalp is highly vascularized, with blood vessels close to the surface. In cold conditions, these vessels radiate heat unless covered. Traditional Yakut hats are made from fox fur or rabbit fur, with flaps that cover the ears and tie under the chin. The fur is thick, often several inches deep. The interior is lined with softer material, lamb's wool or thin reindeer hide. The hat sits snugly, with no gaps where cold air can reach the skin. Horsehair is used in specialized items. Braided horsehair mats serve as additional bedding. Horsehair is coarse and durable. It does not compress easily, maintaining its structure even under weight. This creates air spaces within the mat, adding another layer of insulation between the sleeper and the wooden platform. Horse hide, while less common than reindeer hide, is sometimes used for outer garments. It is heavier, less flexible, but highly durable. Families who raise horses use every part of the animal, including the hide. When the family prepares for sleep, they dress in these layers. The process is methodical. The base layer first, then the middle layer, then the outer layer if the night is expected to be especially cold. The untee are put on, grass insoles checked for dampness. The mittens are placed within reach. The hat remains on, or is positioned nearby for easy access if needed during the night. On the sleeping platform, additional reindeer hides are spread. These serve as blankets, covering the body from neck to feet. In a communal sleeping arrangement, a single large hide may cover multiple people. This shared covering creates a micro-environment, a pocket of warm air trapped beneath the fur. The use of communal blankets is practical. Each person generates heat. When multiple bodies are covered by the same hide, the collective heat warms the space more effectively than individual coverings would. The proximity of other bodies also provides psychological comfort, a sense of security against the vast, cold darkness outside. Some families use layered bedding, a bottom layer of horsehair mat, a middle layer of wool felt, a top layer of reindeer hide. Each layer contributes to the total insulation, reducing the rate at which body heat is lost to the platform and the air below. The arrangement of sleepers is deliberate. Children may sleep between adults, benefiting from the warmth on both sides. Elderly family members who generate less metabolic heat are positioned closest to the stove or covered with additional layers. The clothing and bedding are maintained carefully. Fur must be kept clean and dry. Wet fur loses much of its insulating capacity. After use, garments are hung near the stove to dry. Any moisture from sweat or condensation is driven off by the warmth. Once dry, the fur is brushed or shaken to restore its loft, the fluffiness that creates air pockets. Repairs are made as needed. A torn seam is restitched. A worn section is patched. The materials are valuable. A single reindeer hide represents significant effort. Hunting or herding the animal, processing the hide, tanning it, sewing it into a usable form. These items are not discarded easily. They are maintained, repaired, passed down through generations. The layering strategy extends beyond clothing. It is a philosophy. Multiple barriers, each contributing a portion of the total protection. No single layer is sufficient. Together they create a system that allows the human body to rest comfortably at 60 degrees. Outside, the cold presses against the walls. Inside, wrapped in hollow fibre fur covered by communal hides, lying on elevated platforms within the warm zone of the pechka, the family sleeps. The night continues, the cold remains, but the layers hold. In most Yakut households, one person does not sleep as deeply as the others. This is often the grandfather, the eldest male member of the family. His role is not formally assigned, but it is understood. He is the fire tender, the guardian of the stove, the one who remains partially alert through the night. This vigilance is not constant wakefulness. It is a state between sleep and awareness, a readiness to respond if something changes. The fire tender listens. He listens to the wind outside, to the creak of the timbers, to the sound of the stove as it radiates its stored heat. The wind is an indicator. In Yakutia, the deep winter is usually calm. The coldest nights are windless, the air still and frozen, but occasionally the wind rises. When it does, it can change the conditions inside the house. Wind creates pressure differences. It finds small gaps in the seals. It pulls warm air out through the chimney, even when the damper is closed, if the seal is imperfect. The fire tender knows the sound of the wind. He knows when it is a passing gust and when it is a sustained blow. If the wind becomes strong, he may need to adjust the damper, tightening the seal to prevent heat loss. He may need to check the door, ensuring that it has not shifted in its frame. He listens to the house itself. Wood expands and contracts with temperature. As the exterior walls cool through the night, the logs shift slightly. This creates sounds, creaks, small pops, the faint groan of a timber settling. These sounds are normal. The fire tender recognizes them. But an unusual sound, a sharp crack or a prolonged creak, might indicate a problem. A log splitting, a seal failing, ice forming where it should not. He listens to the stove. As the pechka cools, it emits sounds. The bricks contract. The metal components, the damper, the firebox door, tick and ping as they cool. This is expected. The fire tender knows the rhythm of these sounds. He knows how long the stove should continue to emit heat. If the sounds stop too soon, it may indicate that the stove did not absorb enough heat, that the evening fire was insufficient. In such a case, he may need to relight the fire. This is not common, but it happens. If the temperature in the room begins to drop noticeably, if he can see his breath in the dim light from the dying embers, he knows that action is required. He rises from his sleeping platform, moves to the stove, opens the firebox and adds a small amount of kindling and a few logs. This secondary firing is brief. It is not meant to fully recharge the stove, only to supplement the remaining heat. The goal is to maintain the interior temperature above freezing, to prevent the occupants from waking in discomfort or danger. The fire tender also monitors the people sleeping around him. He listens to their breathing. Steady, rhythmic breathing indicates restful sleep. Irregular breathing or sudden silence may indicate a problem. In extreme cold, if someone becomes too cold during the night, their metabolic rate can drop to dangerous levels. Hypothermia can set in quietly, without obvious symptoms. Children are particularly vulnerable. Their smaller bodies have a higher surface area to volume ratio, which means they lose heat more quickly than adults. The fire tender checks on the children periodically, ensuring they remain covered, that they have not kicked off their blankets or shifted away from the shared hides. He does this without fully waking. The movements are practiced, automatic. A hand extended to adjust a blanket, an ear turned toward the sound of a child's breathing, a glance toward the faint glow of the stove. Then he settles back into his own rest. The fire tender's role is both practical and symbolic. Practically, he ensures the safety of the household. Symbolically, he represents continuity, the transmission of knowledge and responsibility. He is the link between the active day and the vulnerable night. He carries the awareness that others do not need to carry, allowing them to sleep deeply. This role is learned. As a young man, the current fire tender observed his own grandfather or father performing these tasks. He learned to recognize the sounds, to judge the temperature by the feel of the air, to know when intervention was needed and when it was not. Now, in his old age, he performs the same service, and a younger member of the family, perhaps his son or grandson, is beginning to learn by observation, preparing to take on the role in the future. The night is not a single unbroken period of sleep. It is a series of cycles. The family sleeps, the fire tender monitors, the stove radiates, the cold presses, the seals hold. The temperature inside the balagan remains stable. In the hours before dawn, the coldest part of the night, the stove has released most of its stored heat. The surface temperature has dropped. The room is noticeably cooler than it was in the early evening, but it is still warm enough. The family, wrapped in their layers, covered by their hides, remains comfortable. The fire tender judges the time by the quality of the darkness. In deep winter, there are no clocks, no electric lights. Time is measured by sensation, by the position of the stars if the sky is visible through a crack in the door, by the internal rhythm of the body. When he senses that dawn is approaching, he begins to prepare for the morning fire. He rises from his platform. The air is cold against his face. He moves to the stove, opens the firebox. Inside, there may still be a few embers, faintly glowing, or there may be only ash. If embers remain, he adds kindling carefully, coaxing them back to flame. If the firebox is cold, he builds a new fire from scratch, using birch bark or dry grass as tinder. Small twigs as kindling, larger logs as the main fuel. The morning fire is essential. It warms the house for the day ahead. It heats water for washing and for tea. It provides the heat needed to prepare the morning meal, and it recharges the pechka, beginning the cycle again. As the fire catches and begins to burn, the fire tender adjusts the damper, allowing smoke to escape. The room begins to warm. The family stirs. Children wake first, drawn by the warmth and the smell of the fire. Adults follow, rising from their platform, stretching, beginning the routines of the day. The night has passed. The cold remains outside. The fire has been tended. The family has survived another night in one of the coldest places on earth. This is not celebrated. It is simply done. It is the rhythm of winter in Yakutia. Night after night, fire after fire, the same careful practices repeated. And in this repetition, there is a kind of peace, a knowledge that the methods work, that the house will hold, that the stove will warm, that the layers will protect. The fire tender's vigil is one part of a larger system. The architecture, the materials, the diet, the social arrangements. All of these elements work together. No single element is sufficient, but together they create the conditions for survival. And survival in this place is not a desperate struggle. It is a practiced, deliberate, calm process. It is knowledge accumulated and applied. It is the quiet confidence that comes from generations of experience. The night ends, the day begins, and the cycle continues. The warmth of the house and the insulation of fur are not sufficient on their own. The human body must also generate heat from within. This internal heat production is called thermogenesis, and it depends entirely on the fuel the body receives through diet. In Yakutia, the traditional diet is built around animal products. There are few vegetables. Grains are scarce. The growing season is too short, the soil too frozen for most crops. The calories that sustain life through the winter come primarily from meat and fat. The Yakut horse is central to this nutritional system. These horses are not the same as horses in temperate regions. They are smaller, stockier, with thick coats and a remarkable adaptation to cold. Over the course of approximately 800 years, the Yakut horse evolved to survive in temperatures that would kill other breeds. This evolution occurred rapidly by biological standards. The horses developed the ability to store large amounts of subcutaneous fat, a layer beneath the skin that provides both insulation and energy reserves. During the coldest months, their metabolic rate drops. They enter a state sometimes called standing hibernation, where they remain upright but reduce their energy expenditure to conserve resources. The Yakut people rely on these horses not only for transportation and labour, but for food. Horse meat, particularly the meat of young horses called foals, is consumed throughout the winter. The meat is rich in specific nutrients that support human survival in extreme cold. A 150-gram portion of foal meat provides 81% of the daily protein requirement for an adult. Protein is necessary for maintaining muscle, mass and repairing tissues, but in the context of cold survival, it serves another function. The metabolic processing of protein generates heat. This is called the thermic effect of food. Protein has a higher thermic effect than carbohydrates or fats, meaning the body expends more energy digesting it, and this energy is released as warmth. The fat content of foal meat is equally important. The meat contains high-density lipids and polyunsaturated fatty acids. These fats are metabolized slowly, providing a sustained release of energy. When the body breaks down fats, it produces more energy per gram than it does from carbohydrates or protein. This energy is used to maintain core body temperature during periods of rest, such as sleep. The mineral content of the meat supports other physiological processes. A single portion provides 64% of daily iron needs and 80% of daily zinc. Iron is essential for oxygen transport in the blood. Zinc supports immune function and cellular repair. In an environment where physical stress is constant, these minerals are critical. Vitamins are present in smaller but significant amounts. Vitamin A supports vision, which is important during the long, dim winter days. B vitamins support energy metabolism. Vitamin E acts as an antioxidant, protecting cells from damage caused by oxidative stress, which increases in cold conditions. The preparation of horse meat varies. Some of it is cooked, boiled, or roasted over the fire. But a significant portion is consumed raw, frozen. This preparation is called stroganina. Thin shavings of frozen meat or fish are sliced from a larger block and eaten immediately. Stroganina is not simply a method of preservation. It is a way of consuming nutrients that might be destroyed by cooking. Some vitamins, particularly vitamin C, are heat sensitive. By eating frozen raw meat, the Yakut people retain these nutrients. Vitamin C is necessary for preventing scurvy, a disease caused by deficiency. In a diet with almost no plant matter, raw meat becomes a source of this essential vitamin. The act of eating frozen food also has a physiological effect. The body must warm the food to body temperature before it can be digested. This requires energy, and this energy expenditure generates heat. The process is subtle but measurable. Consuming cold or frozen food increases metabolic rate temporarily, contributing to overall thermogenesis. Fish is another component of the winter diet. The rivers of Yakutia freeze, but beneath the ice, fish remain active in the deeper unfrozen channels. Fishing through ice holes provides a steady supply of protein and fat. Fish from cold waters tend to have higher fat content than fish from warmer regions. This fat is rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which support cardiovascular health and reduce inflammation. The combination of horse meat and fish creates a dietary balance. The high fat content prevents a condition known as rabbit starvation or protein poisoning, which can occur when a diet consists of lean meat without sufficient fat. The human body cannot process large amounts of protein without adequate fat. Symptoms include diarrhea, weakness, and a sense of hunger despite eating. By consuming fatty meats, the Yakut people avoid this condition. Dairy products are consumed when available. Milk from cows or horses is sometimes fermented into kumis, a mildly alcoholic beverage. Fermentation increases the availability of certain nutrients and makes the milk easier to digest for adults, many of whom have reduced lactase production. Butter and cheese provide additional fat, though these are less common in the deep winter when fresh milk production decreases. The timing of meals is significant. The largest meal is often consumed in the evening before sleep. This serves a practical purpose. The process of digestion generates heat. By eating a substantial meal before lying down, the body's metabolic rate remains elevated during the early hours of sleep when the stove is still radiating heat and the room is warmest. This elevated metabolism provides internal warmth that supplements the external heat from the pechka and the insulation from the fur. As the night progresses and the stove cools, the body is still processing the meal, still generating heat from within. The specific composition of the evening meal is adjusted based on the temperature. On the coldest nights, the meal includes more fat. Fat digestion is slower than protein or carbohydrate digestion, meaning the thermic effect lasts longer. The body continues to generate heat for hours after eating. Research into the dietary patterns of indigenous populations in Yakutia has revealed genetic adaptations. Studies suggest that individuals whose ancestors have lived in the region for many generations show metabolic differences compared to populations from temperate climates. Their bodies are more efficient at metabolizing fats. They produce heat more readily from lipid consumption. They maintain core temperature with less muscular shivering. This genetic adaptation did not occur in isolation. It developed alongside the cultural practice of consuming high-fat diets. The availability of fatty horse meat and fish created selective pressure. Individuals who could efficiently metabolize these foods were more likely to survive and reproduce. Over generations, the population shifted toward a metabolic profile optimized for cold survival. The diet also affects blood composition. High consumption of polyunsaturated fats from fish and horse meat influences cholesterol levels and vascular health. Research by scientists studying the Yakut population found lower rates of atherosclerosis than would be expected given the high-fat diet. The specific types of fats consumed, combined with genetic factors, appear to protect against the buildup of arterial plaques. This is significant because sedentary periods are long during the Yakut winter. People spend many hours lying still, sleeping or resting. In other populations, prolonged inactivity combined with a high-fat diet might lead to cardiovascular problems. In Yakutia, the combination appears to function differently, suggesting a biological adaptation to the specific demands of the environment. The evening meal is not rushed. It is eaten slowly, deliberately. The family gathers around the warmth of the stove. Food is shared. Conversation is minimal. The focus is on eating, on consuming the fuel that will sustain the body through the night. After the meal, there is a period of rest before sleep. The body begins the digestive process. Blood flow increases to the stomach and intestines. The sensation of warmth spreads through the core. This warmth is not imagined. It is measurable, a real increase in our internal temperature generated by the metabolic processing of food. Children are given portions appropriate to their size. Their metabolic rate is higher than adults, relative to body weight. They burn energy more quickly. They need frequent calorie-dense meals to maintain their core temperature and support growth. Elderly family members may eat smaller portions, but these portions are carefully chosen to include the most nutrient-dense components. Older adults generate less metabolic heat. Their muscle mass is lower, reducing thermogenesis. The fire tender, despite his vigilance through the night, may consume extra fat during the evening meal to compensate for the heat loss that comes with age. The diet is not luxurious. It is functional. There is no excess. Every calorie serves a purpose. Every nutrient supports survival. The food is not seasoned heavily. Salt may be used primarily for preservation. The flavor comes from the meat itself, from the fat, from the slight fermentation of dairy products. There is no waste. Bones are boiled to extract marrow and make broth. Organs are consumed for their concentrated nutrients. Liver provides vitamin A and iron, heart, and kidneys provide protein and B vitamins. Intestines are cleaned and used as casings for preserved meats, hide, hair, sinew. Every part of the animal has a use. This complete utilization is not driven by scarcity alone. It is driven by respect for the resource and by the practical understanding that in an environment where obtaining food requires significant effort, nothing should be discarded. The metabolic fire burning within each member of the family is as essential as the fire in the pechka. One warms the house. The other warms the body. Together they create the conditions for sleep in a place where sleep would otherwise be impossible. Outside, the temperature has dropped to less 60 degrees. Inside, the family has eaten. Their bodies are processing the meal, generating warmth. The stove radiates its stored heat. The layers of fur provide insulation. And the night, though cold, is survivable. The balagan is not always a solitary structure. In traditional Yakut settlements, the winter house is often built adjacent to or connected with the Khoton, the barn where cattle are kept during the coldest months. This architectural arrangement is practical. Cattle cannot survive outside in 60 deg. Their fur provides some insulation, but it is not sufficient for prolonged exposure to extreme cold. Without shelter, the animals would freeze. Their water sources would ice over. They would be unable to eat, unable to survive. The Khoton is a simpler structure than the balagan. It does not require the same level of sealing or insulation. The animals themselves generate heat. A cow's metabolic rate is high. The process of digesting plant matter, particularly through rumination, produces significant thermal energy. In a confined space, this heat accumulates. The walls of the Khoton are typically made from logs, similar to the balagan, but the gaps between logs may be wider. Ventilation is important. The animals produce moisture through respiration and through their waste. This moisture must be allowed to escape, or it will condense on the walls and create dampness. Damp conditions promote cold more effectively than dry conditions. The floor of the Khoton is often compacted earth, sometimes covered with straw or dried grass. The straw serves multiple purposes. It provides a softer surface for the animals to stand and lie on. It absorbs moisture from urine and manure. And as it becomes soiled and begins to decompose, the decomposition process generates additional heat. Manure, when fresh, is warm. The chemical processes of bacterial breakdown release energy. A pile of fresh manure can steam in cold air, visible evidence of the heat being produced. In the confined space of the Khoton, this heat contributes to the overall temperature. It is not as significant as the body heat of the animals, but it is measurable. When the Khoton is built directly adjacent to the balagan, the two structures share a wall. This shared wall becomes a thermal interface. Heat, generated by the animals, radiates through the logs into the living space of the humans. The temperature gradient is less extreme than the gradient between the interior and the exterior, so the heat transfer is slower, but over hours it accumulates. In some designs, there is a small opening or doorway between the Khoton and the balagan. This allows direct access from the living space to the barn without going outside. It also allows some of the warm air from the Khoton to flow into the balagan, though this airflow is carefully controlled. Too much airflow introduces odours and moisture. Too little airflow wastes the available heat. The presence of cattle in the adjacent structure creates a psychological effect as well. The sound of animals breathing, shifting, chewing cud is audible through the shared wall. These sounds are familiar, reassuring. They indicate that the animals are alive, that the temperature in the Khoton is sufficient, that the system is functioning. Families who maintain cattle through the winter engage in a form of interspecies cooperation. The humans provide shelter for the animals provide heat for the humans. Both benefit, both survive. The cattle also provide resources. Milk, though production decreases in winter, is still available in small amounts. The milk is rich in fat, particularly from cows that have been fed on stored hay and grain. This milk is consumed fresh or processed into butter and cheese, adding variety to the diet. Cow dung, as noted earlier, is used for plastering the walls of the balagan, but it's also dried and used as fuel. Dried dung burns slowly, producing a steady, moderate heat. It does not produce the intense heat of wood, but in a place where wood is a limited resource, dried dung serves as a supplemental fuel. The use of dung as fuel is ancient and widespread across cold climates. It is efficient. The dung is a byproduct, already available. Drying it requires no additional energy beyond exposure to air. Once dry, it can be stored indefinitely. When burned, it provides heat and ash, which can be returned to the soil as fertilizer once the ground thaws. The Khoton must be maintained. The straw must be replaced periodically, as it becomes too saturated to absorb more moisture. The manure must be removed, though in winter this is often delayed until spring. The accumulation of manure actually contributes to insulation, creating a layer that protects the floor from the frozen ground beneath. The animals are fed stored hay and grain. These stores are prepared in the summer and autumn, gathered during the short growing season, and stored in covered areas where they remain dry. The quality of the stored feed affects the health of the animals and the amount of heat they generate. Well-fed animals produce more body heat than underfed animals. Watering the animals in winter presents a challenge. Water freezes rapidly in extreme cold. A bucket of water left in the Khoton will freeze solid, within hours. To prevent this, families bring warm water from the house, heated on the stove. The animals drink immediately, and any remaining water is removed before it can freeze. Some families keep a container of water near the stove in the balagan, allowing it to remain liquid. This water is carried to the Khoton at regular intervals, usually twice a day, timed with the feeding schedule. The animals are given enough water to drink, but not so much that waste remains. The connection between the balagan and the Khoton varies by family and by region. Some structures are fully integrated, with the barn forming one wing of a larger building. Others are separate but close, connected by a short covered passage. Still others are entirely separate, requiring the family to go outside to tend the animals. In the coldest regions, full integration is preferred. It minimises exposure to the exterior cold, it maximises the thermal benefit, and it allows the family to monitor the animals without leaving the warmth of the house. The animals kept in the Khoton are usually cows, though some families keep horses, and a few keep goats. Each species has different requirements, different heat output, different behaviours. Cows are docile, easy to manage in confined spaces. Horses are more restless, require more room. Goats are smaller, produce less heat, but are hardy and can survive on minimal feed. The number of animals a family keeps depends on their resources. A single cow can provide enough heat to noticeably warm a shared wall. 2 or 3 cows provide more heat, increasing the temperature in the balagan by several degrees. But each animal requires feed, water, and care. The balance must be maintained. In the depth of winter, the Khoton becomes a secondary centre of warmth. The balagan has the pechka, the Khoton has the animals. Together they create 2 zones of heat within the harsh cold of the landscape. Children are sometimes sent to the Khoton during the day to play or to help with feeding. The warmth of the barn, combined with the presence of the animals, makes it a tolerable space even for extended periods. The children learn to care for the livestock, learning the skills they will need as adults. The breath of the animals is visible in the cold air of the Khoton, though the air is warmer than outside. The animals stand close together, conserving heat. In the coldest weather, they huddle, a behaviour that reduces the surface area exposed to the air and minimises heat loss. At night, the animals sleep standing or lying down, depending on the species and the individual. Their breathing slows. Their metabolic rate decreases slightly, but not as much as in true hibernators. They remain in a state of quiet rest, and through this rest they continue to produce heat. The warmth they generate radiates through the walls of the Khoton, through the shared wall with the balagan, into the space where the family sleeps. It is a slow, steady contribution, not dramatic but significant. It is one more layer in the system of survival. The Khoton represents a partnership, humans and animals each providing what the other needs. The animals receive shelter, food and water. The humans receive warmth, milk, dung for fuel and plaster, and eventually, when the animal is old or injured, meat. This partnership is not sentimental, it is practical. But within the practicality there is a recognition. The animals are necessary, they are valued, they are cared for as carefully as the house itself. The night continues. In the balagan the family sleeps. In the Khoton the cattle rest. The shared wall holds. The heat transfers. And the cold, though relentless, is kept at bay. Inside the balagan, the arrangement of sleeping spaces is not arbitrary. Every position has a purpose, determined by proximity to heat sources and the specific needs of the individuals who occupy them. The warmest location is the palati, the top of the pechka. This surface, broad and flat, can accommodate 1 or 2 people depending on the size of the stove. The heat radiating upward from the bricks below creates a temperature significantly higher than anywhere else in the room. The surface itself remains between 38 and 54 degrees, warm but not burning. This position is reserved for those who need it most. In many households, this is the eldest member of the family, often a grandparent. Older adults generate less body heat. Their metabolic rate is lower. Their circulation is less efficient. They feel the cold more acutely. By placing them on the palati, the family ensures they remain comfortable through the night. Young children may also sleep on the palati, particularly infants. An infant cannot regulate body temperature as effectively as an older child or adult. Their small body mass means they lose heat quickly. The constant warmth of the stove surface helps maintain their core temperature without requiring additional layers that might restrict movement or breathing. In some families, someone recovering from illness sleeps on the palati. Illness often involves fever, chills, or weakness. The warmth supports recovery by reducing the energy the body must expend to maintain temperature, allowing more resources to be directed toward healing. The surface of the palati is not bare brick. It is covered with layers of fabric or fur to provide cushioning and to prevent direct contact with the hot surface. A thick wool blanket or a reindeer hide serves this purpose. The covering is checked regularly to ensure it has not shifted during sleep, exposing skin to the heat. The space on the palati is limited, and not everyone can sleep there. The rest of the family uses the oron, elevated sleeping platforms built along the walls of the room. The oron are constructed from wooden planks, supported by posts or brackets attached to the wall. They stand approximately half a metre above the floor, high enough to avoid the coldest air, which sinks but not so, high that the sleeper's head is near the ceiling, where warm air accumulates but ventilation is poor. The oron closest to the pechka are the next warmest positions. Heat radiates outward from the stove in all directions, but the intensity decreases with distance. The platforms within 2 or 3 metres of the stove receive significant radiant heat. Those further away receive less. The heads of the household typically occupy the oron nearest the stove. This is a matter of both respect and practicality. As the adults responsible for maintaining the household, they must be rested and warm enough to perform their duties. The father may sleep on one side of the stove, the mother on the other, positioning themselves to monitor the room and respond if something requires attention. Younger adults and older children sleep on platforms further from the stove. They are still within the warm zone, the volume of air heated by the pechka, but at slightly lower temperatures. They're higher metabolic. Rates compensate for the reduced external heat. They do not need the same level of warmth as the elderly or the very young. The arrangement also reflects vulnerability. Those least able to tolerate cold sleep closest to the heat. Those most able to generate their own warmth sleep further away. This distribution maximizes the effective use of the available heat. The platforms are not individual beds in the modern sense. Multiple people often share a single oron. A parent and child might sleep side by side. Siblings might occupy the same platform. This shared space serves a thermal purpose. 2 bodies close together create a micro-environment, a pocket of warm air trapped between them and beneath the shared covering of furs. The physical closeness also provides psychological comfort. The long winter nights are dark, silent, isolating. The presence of another person nearby, the sound of their breathing, the warmth of their body reduces the sense of isolation. It reinforces the family, unit, the collective nature of survival. The floor of the balagan is the coldest part of the room. Cold air, being denser than warm air, sinks to the lowest point. Even with the stove radiating heat, the floor remains significantly cooler than the air at chest or head height. Walking barefoot on the floor is uncomfortable. Prolonged contact can lead to heat loss through the feet. The elevation of the sleeping platforms addresses this. By raising the sleeping surface above the floor, the platforms place the sleepers in warmer air. The difference in temperature between the floor and the platform level can be as much as 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. This difference is critical for comfort and safety. Under the platforms, the space is sometimes used for storage. Firewood, tools, or containers of preserved food might be kept there. The cold air near the floor helps preserve food that would spoil at warmer temperatures. It is a practical use of otherwise wasted space. The walls of the balagan also influence the sleeping arrangement. The outer walls, despite their insulation, are cooler than the interior walls or the walls shared with the khoton. Sleeping platforms are usually built along the interior walls or the shared wall, where the temperature is slightly higher. The outer walls are avoided except in the warmest parts of winter, or in exceptionally well-insulated structures. In larger balagani, there may be multiple rooms. The main room contains the pechka and the primary sleeping platforms. A secondary room, if present, might be used for storage or for housing older children who require less direct heat. This secondary room is typically warmer than the exterior but cooler than the main room. It serves as transitional space. The doorway between rooms is usually covered with a heavy curtain made from felt or animal hide. This curtain prevents warm air from escaping the main room, while allowing access when needed. The curtain is kept closed at night, trapping heat to Inya, the space where the family sleeps. Some families use smaller partitions or curtains within the main room to create semi-private sleeping areas. These partitions do not reach the ceiling. They are low, serving to define space and reduce drafts without blocking the flow of warm air from the stove. A curtain might separate the sleeping area of the parents from that of the children. providing a degree of privacy while maintaining thermal connection. The positioning of the Auron is also influenced by the layout of the room. Platforms are built where structural supports allow. Load-bearing beams and posts determine where brackets can be attached. The result is a sleeping arrangement that is both functional and constrained by the architecture. In some households, the platforms are permanent fixtures, built when the house is constructed and remaining in place year after year. In others, they are semi-permanent, disassembled in summer when the family moves to lighter, more open shelters, and reassembled in autumn when the balagan is prepared for winter. The act of lying down to sleep follows the geography of the room, the eldest to the warmest spot, the heads of household near the stove, the children and younger adults further out. Each person knows their place. There is no negotiation, no debate. The arrangement has been established through tradition and through the practical assessment of need. As the family settles for the night, the room becomes a map of warmth. The palati at the centre, the hottest point. The nearest Auron warm and secure. The further platforms cooler but still safe. And beyond, the cold floor, the cold walls, the cold exterior. This geography is understood intuitively. It is learned in childhood, observed and internalized. A child grows up knowing where the warmth is, where safety lies, where the boundaries between comfort and cold are drawn. The night deepens. Each person lies in their assigned space. The palati radiates. The Auron hold their sleepers. The stove continues to release its stored energy. And in this carefully ordered arrangement, the family rests. The geography of sleep is the geography of survival. Position determines temperature. Temperature determines comfort. Comfort determines rest. And rest in the coldest place on earth determines whether morning comes with strength or with weakness. Outside the balagan, the world has entered a state of profound quiet. The wind, if it was blowing earlier in the day, has ceased. The air is motionless, frozen in place. Sound does not carry in the usual way. The extreme cold alters the density of the air, affecting how vibrations travel. This stillness is not empty. It is dense, almost tangible. The silence has weight. It presses against the walls of the house. It fills the spaces between the trees. It settles over the landscape like a physical presence. In this environment, the smallest sounds become noticeable. A branch cracking under the weight of accumulated frost. The faint creak of ice expanding on a frozen river. The distant call of an animal, muffled and strange in the cold air. These sounds are rare, separated by long stretches of absolute quiet. Inside the balagan, the silence is different. It is punctuated by the familiar sounds of habitation. The soft crackle of the pechka as the bricks contract in cooling. The rhythmic breathing of the family, multiple sets of lungs inhaling and exhaling in slightly offset rhythms. The occasional shift of a body on a sleeping platform, the rustle of fur against wood. These sounds are reassuring. They indicate life, warmth, presence. They break the silence without disturbing it. They create a soundscape that is calm, steady, meditative. The breathing of the sleepers is the most constant sound. Each person breathes at their own rate, determined by age, size, and depth of sleep. Children breathe faster, their smaller lungs taking more frequent breaths. Adults breathe slower, deeper. The elderly breathe, with a rhythm that is sometimes irregular, reflecting the changes in physiology that come with age. Collectively, the breathing creates a pattern. It is not synchronized, but it is harmonious. The inhalations and exhalations overlap, creating a continuous flow of sound. This flow is gentle, like waves on a distant shore. It is the sound of a household at rest. The pechka contributes its own sounds. As the bricks cool, they contract. The contraction is uneven, causing small shifts in the structure. These shifts produce faint pops and ticks, sporadic but regular. The metal components of the stove, the door, the damper, also contract, creating higher-pitched sounds, brief and sharp. These sounds follow a predictable pattern. In the first hour after the fire is extinguished and the damper closed, the sounds are more frequent. The stove is still hot, the temperature differential is large, and the contraction is rapid. As the hours pass, the stove cools more slowly. The sounds become less frequent. Eventually they cease altogether as the stove reaches thermal equilibrium with the room. From the Khoton, if the wall is shared, other sounds may be audible. The slow, deep breathing of cattle, the occasional shift of hooves on the straw-covered floor, the sound of chewing as an animal works through its cud. These sounds are muted, filtered through the thickness of the wall, but they are present. They add to the sense of occupancy, of a space that is inhabited not just by humans, but by other living beings. This presence is comforting. It reinforces the idea that the household is not isolated, that life continues in multiple forms, that survival is a shared endeavour. The floor of the balagan, though elevated above the permafrost, sometimes emits sounds. The wooden planks expand and contract with temperature changes. As the room cools through the night, the wood contracts, and the planks shift slightly against each other or against the supporting beams. This creates creaks, subtle and low. These creaks are normal, they are part of the acoustic signature of the house. The fire tender, if he is awake or in light sleep, recognizes them. He knows the difference between the expected sounds of the structure settling and an unexpected sound that might indicate a problem. An unexpected sound could be a crack in a log, a shift in the foundation, or a seal failing. These sounds are rare, but when they occur, they require attention. The fire tender listens carefully, distinguishing between the familiar and the unfamiliar. The silence outside is so complete that sounds from inside the house do not travel far. The thick walls, the insulation of snow and plaster, the closed door, all of these barriers contain the sounds within the structure. To someone standing outside, the balagan might appear lifeless, silent, indistinguishable from the frozen landscape. But inside, there is life, there is warmth, there is breath, there is the slow, steady rhythm of sleep. The darkness inside the balagan is nearly total. The fire has been extinguished. The ice windows allow no light to enter during the night, as there is no light outside to transmit. The room is black, a complete absence of visual information. In this darkness, other senses become more acute. The sense of warmth on the skin, the sense of the weight of the furs covering the body, the sense of the wooden platform beneath, solid and stable, the sense of another person nearby, felt through proximity and sound rather than sight. The body adjusts to the darkness. The eyes, though they cannot see, remain closed in sleep. The mind does not require visual input to navigate the space. The layout of the room is known. The position of the stove, the platforms, the door, all of these are mapped mentally, accessible without sight. This navigation in darkness is learned. Children learn it by moving through the house during the long winter nights, guided by touch and memory. Adults maintain this skill, using it when they need to rise during the night to tend the fire or check on a child. The stillness of the night is not interrupted by external activity. There are no travellers on the roads, no animals moving through the forest, no wind to disturb the snow. The world has paused, locked in place by the extreme cold. This pause creates a sense of suspension. Time continues, but it feels slowed, stretched. The night is long, but it does not feel urgent. There is no pressure to do anything other than rest, to allow the body to conserve energy, to wait for the return of daylight. In the absence of mechanical clocks, time is marked by internal rhythms and by the gradual cooling of the stove. The fire tender, if awake, can estimate the passage of hours by the temperature of the air, by the feel of the stove's surface, by the quality of the darkness. The coldest part of the night comes in the hours before dawn. The stove has released most of its heat. The exterior temperature may have dropped further. The gradient between inside and outside is at its maximum. This is when the seals are tested most severely, when the insulation must perform its function most completely. But the household, if properly prepared, remains secure. The temperature inside the balagan has dropped from its peak in the early evening, but it remains well above freezing. The air is cool but not cold. The sleepers, wrapped in their furs, covered by their hides, remain comfortable. The stillness holds. The silence continues. The night persists. And in this stillness there is a kind of peace. Not the peace of safety from danger, but the peace of a system functioning as it should. The house is doing its work. The stove is doing its work. The furs are doing their work. The bodies are doing their work. Everything is in its place. Everything is performing its role. And in this alignment there is rest. The night is not experienced uniformly by all members of the household. For some, it is a single, unbroken period of deep sleep. For others, it is a series of lighter stages, punctuated by brief moments of semi-wakefulness. The depth of sleep varies by age and by position in the room. Children, once asleep, tend to remain in deep sleep for extended periods. Their bodies, exhausted from the day's activity, demand rest. Their metabolic processes, still developing, require significant downtime for growth and repair. They sleep heavily, barely moving, their breathing slow and regular. Adults, particularly those with responsibilities, sleep more lightly. The fire tender, as noted, remains in a state of partial awareness. The mother, if there are young children, sleeps with one part of her mind attuned to their sounds. A change in breathing, a whimper, a restless movement, any of these can wake her partially, prompting her to check without fully waking. This light sleep is adaptive. It allows for monitoring without the cost of full wakefulness. It permits rest while maintaining a degree of vigilance. Over generations, this pattern has become ingrained, a physiological response to the demands of the environment. The elderly often sleep in shorter cycles. They wake more frequently, sometimes due to discomfort, sometimes simply because their sleep patterns have changed with age. When they wake, they lie still, listening to the sounds of the house, feeling the warmth of the stove, reassessing their comfort before drifting back to sleep. These brief wakings are not disruptive. They are part of the natural rhythm of the night. The person wakes, orients themselves, and returns to sleep within minutes. The continuity of rest is maintained even though the sleep is not continuous. The passage of hours is marked by changes in the room. The temperature drops gradually. The stove, though still warm, is no longer radiating heat at the intensity it did in the early evening. The air has cooled. The difference is subtle but noticeable to those who are awake. The fire tender, during one of his periods of light wakefulness, may reach out and touch the surface of the stove. The warmth is still there, but it has diminished. He estimates the time based on this warmth. If the surface is still too hot to hold his hand against for more than a few seconds, it is relatively early in the night. If the warmth is gentle, comfortable to the touch, it is later. If the stove is merely warm, barely above body temperature, dawn is approaching. This tactile method of timekeeping is not precise, but it is effective. It provides a sense of where the night stands in its progression. It informs the decision of whether to add more fuel to the fire or to let the stove continue cooling. In most cases, no additional fuel is added. The stove was loaded with sufficient wood in the evening to carry the household through the night. Adding more would be wasteful, and firewood, though available, is not unlimited. It must be harvested, transported, split and stored. Each log represents labour, and labour in the cold is taxing. The family's clothing, worn to sleep, may be adjusted during the night. A child who has kicked off a covering is recovered by a parent. An adult who feels too warm may shift a fur aside slightly, allowing cooler air to reach the skin. These adjustments are made without fully waking, automatic responses to the body's signals. The position of sleepers may also change. Someone lying on one side for too long may shift to the other side. Someone whose arm has gone numb may adjust their position to restore circulation. These movements are slow, deliberate and minimal. The goal is to maintain comfort without disturbing others, or losing the warmth that has accumulated beneath the furs. In the darkness, dreams may occur. The content of dreams is shaped by the experiences of the day, by memories, by the subconscious processing of information. In a culture where survival depends on attention to detail, dreams may include scenarios of tending the fire, sealing the house, preparing food, managing livestock. These are not anxious dreams, but reflective ones, the mind rehearsing and reinforcing the knowledge necessary for life. Some dreams may be more abstract, disconnected from daily tasks. These are less common, but not absent. The human mind, even in sleep, seeks to process, to organize, to make sense of the world. In the stillness of the Yakut night, there is time for this processing to occur without interruption. The breathing of the household continues as the foundation of the nighttime soundscape. Occasionally a snore may emerge, usually from an adult sleeping on their back. The The sound is brief, not sustained, and does not wake the sleeper or others. It is absorbed into the general rhythm of the room. Children sometimes make small sounds in their sleep, a murmur, a sigh, a brief word. These sounds indicate that they are dreaming, that their minds are active even as their bodies rest. Parents, if they hear these sounds, listen for a moment to ensure the child is not distressed. If the sounds are calm, they return to their own sleep. The Khoton, if connected, also experiences the passage of night. The cattle, like the humans, enter deeper states of rest. Their breathing slows. Their body heat continues to radiate, maintaining the temperature in the barn and contributing to the warmth of the shared wall. The manure on the floor continues its slow decomposition, releasing heat into the confined space. Occasionally an animal may shift position, stand or lie down again. The sound of hooves on straw is soft but audible through the wall. This sound, like the sounds of the family, is part of the nighttime environment. It is expected, normal, and therefore not alarming. As the night progresses, the exterior temperature may drop further. Yakutia experiences some of the coldest temperatures on Earth, and the coldest hours are those just before dawn. The air outside is utterly still. Frost has formed on every surface. The snow, already hard, becomes even harder, its surface crystalline and reflective under the faint light of stars. Inside, the house resists this cold. The seals hold. The plaster insulates. The ice windows remain frozen, their thickness preventing heat from escaping. The system continues to function. The body's core temperature is maintained within a narrow range, between 36.5 degrees and 37.5 degrees. The peripheral temperature, the temperature of the skin, the hands, the feet, may be lower, but this is normal. The body prioritizes the core where vital organs are located and allows the periphery to cool slightly to conserve energy. This prioritization is automatic, controlled by the autonomic nervous system. It does not require conscious thought. The body knows what to do. It constricts blood vessels in the extremities, reducing heat loss. It shivers if core temperature drops too low, generating heat through muscle contractions. But in the Balagan, with adequate insulation and the residual heat from the stove, shivering is rarely necessary. The passage of hours is steady, inexorable. There is no shortening the night, no speeding its progression. It unfolds at its own pace, governed by the rotation of the earth and the position of the sun below the horizon. For the family, the night is not something to be endured, but something to be inhabited. It is a period of rest, of recovery, of preparation for the next day. It is accepted as part of the cycle, neither feared nor resented. The stillness, the darkness, the cold outside, all of these are constants. They do not change. What changes is the state of the household, moving through the stages of the night, from the warmth of the early evening to the coolness of the pre-dawn hours, and eventually to the moment when the fire tender rises to begin the morning fire. But that moment has not yet arrived. The night continues, the hours pass, the family sleeps. The reindeer hide covering the sleeping family is not simply a blanket. It is a biological technology, refined over millennia of evolution in the Arctic environment. Each hair on the hide possesses a structure that makes it one of the most effective natural insulators known. When examined closely, a reindeer hair reveals its secret. The shaft is hollow, containing a core of air separated from the exterior by a thin wall of keratin. This hollow structure is not accidental. It developed as an adaptation to extreme cold, allowing the reindeer to maintain body heat while minimizing the weight and metabolic cost of growing dense fur. The air trapped inside each hair is stationary. It cannot circulate, cannot convect, cannot carry heat away from the body. This trapped air acts as a barrier, preventing the transfer of thermal energy. The principle is the same as that used in modern insulated windows or thermoses. Air, when confined and prevented from moving, resists heat transfer. A single reindeer hide contains hundreds of thousands of these hollow hairs, each one functioning as an independent insulation unit. When the hide is placed over a sleeping person, these hairs create a continuous layer of trapped air pockets between the warm body and the cold room. The effectiveness of this insulation can be measured. Research into reindeer fur has shown that it can reduce heat loss by up to 90% compared to bear skin. In practical terms, this means a person covered by reindeer hide can maintain core body temperature in conditions that would otherwise cause hypothermia within hours. The hide used in the balagan comes from reindeer harvested in autumn or early winter. At this time of year, the animal's coat is at its thickest, grown in preparation for the coldest months. The hide is removed carefully, preserving the hair and the underlying skin structure. Processing the hide requires skill. The skin must be cleaned of fat and tissue without damaging the hair follicles. It must be dried slowly to prevent cracking. Traditional methods involve scraping with specialized tools, working the hide to keep it supple, and sometimes treating it with natural oils or rendered fat to maintain flexibility. Once processed, the hide can last for years if properly maintained. It is checked regularly for damage. If hairs begin to fall out in patches, the hide may need to be replaced or repaired. Sometimes 2 damaged hides are sewn together to create a larger usable covering. The orientation of the hide matters. When used as a blanket, the hide is typically placed with the hair side facing down toward the sleeper's body. This maximizes contact between the hollow hairs and the skin, trapping warmth in the immediate space around the body. Some families use 2 hides, one with hair facing down and one with hair facing up, creating a double layer of insulation. The warmth generated by the human body radiates outward in all directions. Without insulation, this warmth would be lost to the surrounding air. The reindeer hide captures this radiation, trapping it in the layer of air adjacent to the skin. The temperature beneath the hide is measurably higher than the ambient room temperature, creating a microclimate that allows for comfortable sleep. This microclimate is not uniformly warm. The air closest to the body is warmest. The air at the edge of the hide, where it meets the cooler room air, is cooler. This creates a temperature gradient, but the gradient is gentle, not steep. The transition from warm to cool is gradual, which prevents the discomfort of sudden cold. Children sleeping under shared hides benefit from each other's warmth. 2 bodies under one hide generate more heat than a single body, and the combined heat raises the temperature of the microclimate more effectively. This is why families often cluster children together under a single large hide, rather than providing separate coverings for each child. The weight of the hide also contributes to warmth. A heavy hide presses gently against the body, eliminating air gaps where heat could escape. The contact between the hide and the sleeper is continuous, ensuring that the insulating layer remains in place even if the person shifts position during sleep. Reindeer hide is not the only animal material used, though it is the most common for bedding. Bear hide, when available, provides similar insulation. Bear fur is longer and coarser than reindeer fur, and while the individual hairs are not hollow, they are numerous and dense enough to trap significant amounts of air. Horsehair is used in mats, and sometimes in woven blankets. Horsehair is stiffer than reindeer or bear fur, which gives it structural properties. A horsehair mat does not compress as easily under weight, maintaining air spaces even when a person lies on it. These mats are placed on the sleeping platform beneath the sleeper, providing insulation from below and preventing heat from being conducted into the wooden planks. The combination of materials creates a layered insulation system, the horsehair mat below, the sleeper's body in the middle, the reindeer hide above. Each layer contributes to the total resistance to heat loss, and together they create an environment where sleep is possible despite the extreme exterior cold. The hide is not washed frequently. Water would damage the hair structure, causing it to mat and lose its insulating properties. Instead, the hide is aired regularly. When the weather permits, during a warmer day, or when the family is active and the balagan is being cleaned, the hide is taken outside and shaken vigorously. This removes dust, loose hairs, and any moisture that has accumulated. Exposure to cold, dry air helps preserve the hide. The cold kills bacteria and parasites that might otherwise degrade the material. The dryness prevents mold and mildew. In this way, the extreme climate that makes the hide necessary also helps maintain it. If the hide becomes soiled, it may be scraped with a dull blade to remove the affected area. This is done carefully to avoid damaging the hair roots. Small tears or holes are sewn with sinew, using techniques passed down through generations. The stitching is tight and even, ensuring that the repair does not create a weak point where heat can escape. The care of the hides is typically the responsibility of the women in the household, though men may assist with larger repairs or with processing new hides. Children learn by watching, gradually taking on small tasks as they develop the necessary skill and coordination. The value of a well-maintained reindeer hide cannot be overstated. In a culture where survival depends on effective insulation, the hide is as important as the house itself or the stove. A family without adequate hides would struggle to sleep safely through the coldest nights, regardless of how well the house is sealed or how hot the fire burns. Some hides are decorated with embroidery or beadwork, particularly those used as outer garments or ceremonial items, but the hides used for sleeping are typically undecorated. Function is prioritized over appearance. The goal is warmth, not display. The feel of reindeer fur against the skin is distinctive. It is soft but not silky, thick but not rough. The individual hairs bend under pressure, conforming to the contours of the body. This conformity ensures complete coverage, eliminating cold spots where the hide might otherwise lift away from the skin. At night, as the family settles under their hides, the warmth begins to accumulate within minutes. The body's heat, trapped by the hollow hairs, raises the temperature beneath the covering. The sensation is gradual, a slow spreading of warmth that extends from the core to the extremities. This warmth is reassuring. It signals that the insulation is working, that the system is functioning. It allows the mind to relax, to release the vigilance that accompanies cold. Sleep comes more easily when the body is warm, when there is no shivering, no tension in the muscles, no discomfort pulling attention away from rest. The reindeer, living outside in the same extreme cold that threatens the humans, are protected by the same fur that now protects the family. The animal survives the winter. The hide, harvested and processed, allows the humans to survive as well. It is a transfer of adaptation from one species to another, mediated by skill and knowledge. Through the night, the hollow hairs continue their work. They trap warmth. They resist cold. They create a boundary between the living body and the hostile environment. And in this boundary, sleep becomes possible. The transition from night to day in a Yakut winter is gradual and subtle. There is no sudden sunrise, no flood of light. The darkness thins slowly, imperceptibly, over the course of an hour or more. The fire tender is usually the first to sense this change. His internal clock, calibrated by years of winter nights, registers the approach of morning. The quality of the darkness shifts. It is difficult to articulate how, but those accustomed to the rhythm can feel it. The night has reached its deepest point and is beginning to reverse. He lies still for a moment, assessing. The temperature in the room has dropped as far as it will drop. The stove, though still warmer than the surrounding air, is no longer radiating significant heat. The room is cool but not cold. His breath is not visible, which means the temperature remains well above freezing. He listens. The breathing of the family is steady. No one is restless. No child is awake or distressed. The sounds from the Khoton, if audible, are normal. The house is secure. Satisfied, he begins to move. The movement is slow, deliberate. He shifts the reindeer hide aside, exposing himself to the cooler air of the room. The temperature difference is noticeable but not shocking. His body, accustomed to these conditions, adjusts. He sits up on his sleeping platform, feet dangling over the edge. He pauses, allowing his circulation to stabilize. Standing too quickly after lying flat for hours can cause dizziness, particularly in older adults. He breathes deeply, fully inflating his lungs, preparing his body for activity. He lowers his feet to the floor. The wooden planks are cold to the touch. He has slept in his base layers. The istanga's made from soft fawn hide, but his feet are bare. The cold of the floor travels through the soles of his feet, a sharp contrast to the warmth he felt under the hide. He reaches for his unarde, the reindeer leg boots that stand ready beside his sleeping platform. He pulls them on, first checking the grass insoles to ensure they are dry. The boots provide immediate insulation, separating his feet from the cold floor. He stands, steadying himself. His joints are stiff from the night's inactivity. He moves slowly, allowing his muscles to warm and loosen. He walks toward the pechka, his steps quiet on the wooden floor. The stove is still warm, but the warmth is faint. He places his hand on the surface. The temperature is pleasant to the touch, comfortable, but it is not the active heat of the previous evening. The thermal energy stored in the masonry has been largely expended. He moves to the firebox door. The metal handle is cool. He wraps his hand in a piece of cloth before gripping it, a precaution even though the stove is no longer dangerously hot. He pulls the door open. Inside, the firebox is dark. A bed of fine ash covers the bottom, and within this ash, a few embers may still glow faintly. If the fire was properly managed the night before, these embers can serve as a starting point for the morning fire. If not, the firebox will be completely cold and the fire must be built from scratch. He peers into the firebox, allowing his eyes to adjust to the darkness inside. He sees a faint red glow near the back, a coal that has retained some heat through the night. This is fortunate, it will make the process easier. He retrieves kindling from the storage area beneath one of the sleeping platforms. The kindling is small, dry twigs and splinters of wood, carefully prepared and kept in a dry container. Moisture is the enemy of fire starting. Even a small amount of moisture can prevent kindling from igniting. He also takes a piece of birch bark. Birch bark contains natural oils that make it highly flammable. Even in damp conditions, birch bark will burn, though in the controlled environment of the Balagan, dampness is rarely an issue. He places the birch bark in the firebox, positioning it near the glowing ember. He adds a few of the smallest twigs, arranging them in a loose structure that allows air to circulate. Fire needs oxygen. A densely packed pile of kindling will smother the ember before it can grow. He blows gently on the ember. The increased oxygen causes it to brighten. The red glow intensifies, spreading to the adjacent wood. The birch bark begins to smoke, then suddenly catches, a small flame appearing at its edge. The flame is fragile. He continues to blow, gently and steadily, feeding oxygen to the combustion. The flame spreads along the birch bark, igniting the smallest twigs. The twigs burn quickly, their thin diameter allowing them to reach combustion temperature rapidly. As the small flames establish themselves, he adds slightly larger pieces of kindling. He builds the fire in stages, never adding too much fuel at once. Each addition must catch from the flames below before the next is added. Patience is essential. The firebox begins to fill with small active flames. The light from these flames illuminates the interior of the room, casting a warm, flickering glow. The family, still sleeping, is visible now in the dim light. He adds larger pieces of wood, sticks the thickness of a finger. These take longer to ignite, but the fire is now strong enough to consume them. The flames grow taller, their crackling sound more pronounced. Once the finger-thick sticks are burning steadily, he adds the main fuel. These are split logs, each piece the size of a forearm. He places them carefully, ensuring they rest on the burning base but do not smother it. Air must continue to flow through the arrangement. The logs begin to catch. The bark ignites first, then the outer layers of wood. Smoke rises, drawn upward through the flues and out the chimney. He checks the damper, ensuring it is fully open to allow the smoke to escape. A closed or partially closed damper at this stage would fill the room with smoke. As the fire establishes itself, the temperature in the firebox rises rapidly. The heat radiates outward, warming the bricks and clay of the stove. The surface of the pechka, which had cooled overnight, begins to warm again. The fire tender monitors the flames. The colour is important. A yellow or orange flame indicates good combustion. A red flame suggests insufficient oxygen. A blue flame, though rare in a wood fire, would indicate very high temperatures and complete combustion. He adjusts the firebox door, leaving it slightly open to regulate airflow. The opening controls the rate of combustion. A wide opening allows more air, producing a hotter, faster fire. A narrow opening restricts air, producing a slower, more sustained burn. For the morning fire, he wants a moderate burn. The goal is to warm the room and heat water for the day's needs, not to fully recharge the stove immediately. That will come later, with the evening fire. As the fire burns, the room begins to warm. The change is slow at first, then more noticeable. The cool air that settled during the night is displaced by warmer air rising from the stove. Convection currents begin to circulate, distributing the heat. The family starts to wake. Children stir under their hides, responding to the sound of the fire and the growing warmth. Adults open their eyes, remaining still for a moment before rising. The transition from sleep to wakefulness is gradual, unhurried. The fire tender remains by the stove, tending the fire until it is stable and self-sustaining. Once the logs are burning well and the smoke has cleared, he will step back and allow the fire to do its work. But for now, he stays close, ensuring the process proceeds correctly. The morning has begun. The coldest part of the night has passed. The fire has been rekindled. The household is waking. Another day in the Yakut winter is underway. In the single room of the Balagan, the family does not sleep in isolation. There are no separate chambers, no walls dividing one sleeper from another. The entire household shares the same space, the same air, the same sounds. This communal arrangement is not merely a result of limited space, it serves a thermal function. Multiple bodies in close proximity generate more heat than a single body in isolation. The warmth produced by one person contributes to the warmth experienced by others. The principle is straightforward. Each human body at rest produces approximately 80 to 100 watts of heat, roughly equivalent to a standard incandescent light bulb. This heat radiates outward in all directions. In an enclosed space, this radiation warms the surrounding air and surfaces. When multiple people occupy the same room, their collective heat output is cumulative. A family of 6 produces 480 to 600 watts of heat simply by existing. This is a significant contribution to the thermal balance of the room, supplementing the heat provided by the pechka. The arrangement of sleeping platforms facilitates this heat sharing. The platforms are positioned close together, often separated by less than a metre. The warm air rising from one sleeper mixes with the warm air rising from another, creating a more uniform temperature distribution than would exist if the sleepers were widely separated. Children often sleep in pairs or small groups on shared platforms. Their smaller bodies produce less individual heat, but together they generate enough warmth to create a comfortable sleeping environment. The proximity also provides psychological comfort, reducing anxiety and promoting deeper sleep. The breathing of multiple people in a shared space creates a specific atmospheric condition. With each exhalation, the sleepers release carbon dioxide and water vapour. The carbon dioxide concentration in the room increases slightly over the course of the night, though ventilation through small gaps in the structure prevents it from reaching harmful levels. The water vapour is more significant. Each person exhales approximately 200 to 300 millilitres of water over the course of a night. For a family of 6, this amounts to more than a litre of moisture released into the air. In most climates, this moisture would increase humidity noticeably. But in the extreme cold of Yakutia, the exterior air is extraordinarily dry. The plaster on the walls, made from cow dung and mud, absorbs much of the moisture before it can accumulate. The balance between moisture production and absorption keeps the interior humidity at a stable, comfortable level. The sound of breathing creates an acoustic environment that is distinctly different from silence. The rhythm of inhalation and exhalation, multiplied by the number of sleepers, produces a gentle, continuous sound. This sound is not disturbing. It is soothing, a confirmation of presence and life. Research into sleep environments has shown that certain rhythmic sounds can promote deeper sleep. The sound of breathing falls into this category. It is regular, predictable, and low in volume. It does not contain sharp contrasts or sudden changes that might trigger alertness. For those who are awake, the sound provides information. A parent listening in the darkness can identify individual family members by their breathing patterns. The shallow, rapid breath of a young child. The deeper, slower breath of an adult. The occasional irregular pattern of an elderly person. Changes in breathing can signal distress. A child who begins to breathe rapidly or irregularly may be having a nightmare or may be uncomfortable. An adult who stops breathing for several seconds, a condition known as sleep apnea, may need to be repositioned to restore normal breathing. The fire tender, during his periods of light wakefulness, listens to the collective breathing of the household. He uses it as a diagnostic tool, assessing the well-being of the family without needing to see them in the darkness. The shared space also means shared vulnerability. If the fire goes out unexpectedly, if a seal fails and cold air enters, Everyone is affected. There is no retreat to a separate, warmer room. The family succeeds or fails together. This collective vulnerability reinforces social bonds. Each person's survival depends on the competence and vigilance of others. The person who sealed the walls properly, the person who tended the fire correctly, the person who prepared adequate food and clothing, all of these contributions are interconnected. Children learn this interdependence from an early age. They observe the rituals of preparation. They see the consequences when something is not done properly. They understand that their comfort and safety depend on the efforts of the entire household. The lessons are not taught through formal instruction. They are absorbed through observation and participation. A child who watches the fire tender add wood to the stove learns the sequence of actions. A child who helps prepare food learns which ingredients provide warmth and which do not. In the shared sleeping space, privacy is minimal. Personal space is limited. But these limitations are not experienced as deprivations. They are the normal conditions of winter life, accepted without resentment. The absence of privacy does not mean an absence of individuality. Each person has their assigned place on the platforms. Each has their own clothing, their own portion of food. But these individual elements exist within a framework of collective life. The breathing, the warmth, the sounds, all of these blend together in the darkness. The boundaries between individuals become less distinct. The family becomes a single organism, breathing together, warming together, surviving together. This collective existence is temporary. When summer arrives, the family will move to lighter shelters, spreading out into individual or smaller shared spaces. But during the winter, unity is necessary. The cold demands it. As the night progresses, the rhythm of shared breathing continues. It does not falter. It does not stop. It is as constant as the rotation of the earth, as reliable as the passage of time. And in this constancy, there is security. The sound confirms that everyone is still alive, still breathing, still present. The warmth confirms that the system is working, that the heat is being shared, that the cold is being held at bay. The family sleeps on, wrapped in furs, surrounded by each other's warmth, breathing the same air, sharing the same darkness. The night is long, but they are not alone. They are together, and together they endure. Beyond the walls of the Balagan, the landscape exists in a state that is hostile to all unprotected life. The temperature has dropped to 62 degrees. At this level, the physical properties of matter change. Steel becomes brittle, rubber shatters, exposed skin freezes in less than a minute. The air itself has a different quality. It is dense, heavy, almost viscous. Movement through it requires effort. Each breath draws in air so cold that it must be warmed by the nasal passages before it can reach the lungs. Breathing through the mouth risks damaging the delicate tissues of the throat and bronchi. The snow on the ground is not the soft, fluffy material of milder climates. It has been compressed by the cold and by its own weight into a hard, crystalline surface. Walking on it produces a distinctive sound, a squeak or crunch that results from the crystals fracturing under pressure. The landscape is monochromatic. The sky, when visible, is a deep indigo, almost black. The stars are brilliant, sharp points of light that do not twinkle. The absence of atmospheric moisture eliminates the refraction that causes stars to flicker in warmer climates. The trees stand motionless, their branches coated in frost. The frost has accumulated over days and weeks, layer upon layer, until each branch carries a thick white coating. The weight of this frost causes some branches to droop. Occasionally one will crack and fall, the sound sharp and sudden in the silent landscape. There are few animals visible. Most have retreated to burrows, dens, or sheltered areas. Those that remain active have adaptations similar to the reindeer and the Yakut horse. Thick fur, layers of fat, specialized metabolic processes. They move slowly, conserving energy, aware that every calorie expended must be replaced through food, and food is scarce. The wind, when it blows, is catastrophic. Wind at these temperatures transforms cold from uncomfortable to lethal. The wind chill effect, a measure of heat loss caused by moving air, can lower the effective temperature by 20 or 30 degrees. At 62°, with even a moderate wind, the effective temperature can approach 90°. At this level, frostbite occurs in seconds. Survival outside is measured in minutes, but tonight there is no wind. The air is completely still. This stillness is what makes survival possible. The balagan, with its sealed walls and insulated structure, can maintain its interior warmth only in the absence of wind. A sustained wind would find every small gap, every imperfect seal, and exploit it, drawing heat from the house faster than the stove could replace it. The permafrost beneath the snow is meters thick. The ground has been frozen for thousands of years, accumulating ice in layers. During the brief summer, the top few centimetres may thaw, creating a muddy, unstable surface. But in winter, the permafrost is solid, unyielding, a foundation that does not shift or settle. This permanence has implications for construction. Buildings cannot have deep foundations. They cannot rely on buried utilities. Everything must be built on or above the surface, adapted to the reality of ground that never truly thaws. The river, which flows freely in summer, is now frozen solid. The ice is thick enough to support the weight of vehicles. Beneath the ice, in the deepest channels where the water remains liquid, fish continue to exist, though their metabolism has slowed to a fraction of its summer rate. The ice on the river is not smooth. The process of freezing creates pressure ridges, cracks and upheavals as the expanding ice pushes against itself. These formations create a broken, uneven surface that is difficult to traverse. In spring, when the ice begins to break up, these formations will be the first to fragment, creating dangerous conditions. The contrast between the interior of the balagan and the exterior landscape is extreme. Inside, the temperature is above 15°, possibly approaching 20° in the warmest areas near the stove. Outside, it is 62°. The difference is more than 75 degrees, a gradient that exists across the thickness of the wall. This gradient creates stress on the materials. Wood expands and contracts with temperature. The exterior surface of a log, exposed to 60 °C, contracts. The interior surface, warmed by the room, expands slightly. This differential creates tension within the wood, which over time can lead to cracking. The seals between the logs are tested by this stress. The oakum compresses and expands. The plaster flexes slightly. But if properly applied and maintained, these seals hold. The integrity of the thermal boundary is preserved. The ice windows, several inches thick, mediate between interior and exterior. The inner surface of the ice is slightly warmer than the outer surface, but both remain frozen. The ice is in equilibrium, stable in its frozen state, neither melting nor sublimating significantly. Light does not penetrate the ice at night because there is no light to penetrate. The darkness outside is total, broken only by starlight, which is too faint to illuminate anything beyond faint outlines. If someone were to step outside the balagan during the night, the transition would be shocking. The warmth of the interior, which feels comfortable and safe, would be stripped away in seconds. The cold would assault every exposed surface. The face, the hands, any gap in clothing would become a point of rapid heat loss. The body's response would be immediate. Blood vessels in the extremities would constrict, reducing blood flow to conserve core heat. Shivering would begin within seconds, the muscles contracting rapidly to generate warmth. The heart rate would increase, pumping blood faster to circulate heat. But these responses are insufficient at 60 Situdian. Without proper clothing, without the layers of fur and hide, a person would have minutes at most before core temperature began to drop. Frostbite would affect the extremities, fingers, toes, nose, ears, within the first minute. Hypothermia would set in shortly after. This is why the night is spent entirely inside. The balagan is not a house in the casual sense. It is a survival chamber, a carefully constructed barrier between life and death. Leaving it during the coldest hours is not a matter of discomfort. It is a matter of immediate danger. The family inside is aware of this. They may not articulate it constantly, but the knowledge is present. The wall, a metre or more of logs, plaster, and insulation, is all that separates them from a landscape that would kill them in minutes. This awareness does not create anxiety. It creates respect. Respect for the materials, for the craftsmanship, for the knowledge that went into building the balagan. respect for the fire tender who maintains the stove, respect for the process of sealing, of layering, of preparing. The outer cold is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a condition to be managed. The Yakut people do not fight the winter. They accommodate it. They build structures that work with the cold rather than against it. They wear clothing that traps warmth rather than trying to generate it from nothing. They eat food that fuels internal heat production. All of these strategies are responses to the outer cold, adaptations that make survival possible. The cold does not relent. It does not negotiate. It simply exists, a fundamental characteristic of the environment. And the balagan, warm and sealed, exists in opposition to it. The two states, interior warmth, exterior cold, remain separated by the thickness of the wall. The separation holds, the night continues, and inside the family sleeps, secure in the knowledge that the boundary between life and lethal cold is intact. The physical elements of survival, the walls, the stove, the furs, are not the only considerations in Yakut winter life. There is also a spiritual dimension, a set of beliefs and practices that coexist with the practical technologies. The Yakut people have a rich cosmology, preserved in the Olonko, a collection of oral epics that have been passed down through generations. These epics describe the structure of the universe, the relationships between humans and spirits, and the proper ways to live in harmony with the natural and supernatural worlds. In this cosmology, the night is not merely a period of darkness. It is a time when the boundary between the physical world and the spirit world becomes thinner, when certain forces become more active. The spirits known as Abahi are believed to roam during the winter darkness, particularly during the coldest nights. The Abahi are not benevolent. They are described as unclean forces, entities that bring harm, illness, or misfortune. They are associated with cold, with darkness, with death. Protecting oneself and one's family from these spirits is considered as important as protecting against physical cold. This protection takes multiple forms. The clothing worn during winter is not merely functional, it is also apotropaic, designed to ward off spiritual danger. The embroidery on winter garments, particularly on items worn on the extremities, follows specific patterns believed to confuse or repel the Abahi. The mittens, called a tuluk, often feature silver adornments. Silver is considered a protective material in many cultures, including among the Yakut. The metal is believed to have properties that evil spirits cannot tolerate. A small piece of silver sewn into a mitten or attached to a hat serves as a talisman, a guard against unseen threats. The furs themselves are believed to carry protective power. Certain animals, bears, wolves, foxes, are considered spiritually potent. Wearing the fur of these animals is thought to transfer some of their strength and cunning to the wearer. A hat made from fox fur not only provides warmth, but also offers spiritual protection. These beliefs do not contradict the practical function of the materials. They coexist. The fur keeps the body warm, and it also keeps the spirits safe. The two functions are not separated in Yakut thought. The physical and spiritual are intertwined, aspects of the same reality. The stove, the pechka, also has spiritual significance. Fire is considered a sacred element, a source of life and purification. The fire in the stove is not just a tool for heating. It is a presence, something to be respected and properly tended. The fire tender's role is partly practical and partly ritual. He maintains the fire, but he also serves as its guardian, ensuring that it is treated correctly. Certain actions are considered disrespectful to fire. Spitting into it, throwing trash into it, or allowing it to go out through neglect are all believed to bring misfortune. When the fire is first lit in a new stove, or at the beginning of winter, it may be blessed or acknowledged in some way. This might involve a quiet prayer, a small offering placed in the fire, or simply a moment of conscious gratitude for the warmth the fire will provide. The house itself is seen as a protective space, not just physically but spiritually. The threshold, the entrance to the balagan, is particularly significant. It marks the boundary between the safe interior and the dangerous exterior. Certain rituals may be performed at the threshold to prevent harmful spirits from entering. These rituals are often simple. Stepping over the threshold with the right foot first, pausing before entering to acknowledge the transition, In some families, a protective symbol or object may be placed near the door, a piece of metal, a specific stone, or a carved wooden figure. The animals in the Khoton are also considered to have protective qualities. Their presence, their warmth, their sounds. All of these contribute to the sense that the household is occupied, alive, and therefore not vulnerable to spiritual intrusion. Empty houses, silent and cold, are believed to be more susceptible to occupation by unwanted forces. Children are taught these beliefs alongside the practical skills of survival. They learn to respect the fire, to wear their protective silver, to enter the house properly. These teachings are not separate from the lessons about sealing walls or tending livestock. They are part of the same education, a holistic understanding of how to live in the Yakut winter. The embroidery on clothing is often done by women, passed down from mother to daughter. The patterns are not arbitrary. Each design has meaning, specific symbols that represent protection, health, prosperity. The work is meditative, done during the long winter evenings when outdoor work is impossible. A garment covered in protective embroidery represents hours of careful labour. It is valued not only for its warmth, but for the intention and care embedded in every stitch. When a child wears a hat embroidered by their grandmother, they carry with them both physical warmth and the spiritual protection of that connection. The stories told during winter nights often reinforce these beliefs. The Olonko epics describe heroes who must navigate both physical and spiritual dangers. They travel through frozen landscapes, encounter a Bahi, and survive through a combination of strength, cunning, and proper observance of spiritual protocols. These stories serve multiple functions. They entertain during the long, dark hours. They educate about proper behaviour and values, and they reinforce the cosmological framework that gives meaning to the practices of daily life. The balance between practical and spiritual is not something that requires conscious effort. It is simply how life is understood. The wall keeps out the cold and the spirits. The fire provides warmth and sacred energy. The fur insulates the body and guards the soul. Modern observers might categorize some of these practices as superstition, distinguishing them from the real technologies of survival. But for the Yakut people, the distinction is artificial. The protection is holistic. The cold is both a physical and a spiritual threat. Defense requires both material and immaterial strategies. As the family sleeps in the balagan, they are protected on multiple levels. The thick walls seal out the freezing air and create a barrier against malevolent forces. The pechka radiates heat and maintains the sacred fire. The embroidered garments and silver talismans ward off unseen dangers. The collective presence of the family and their animals fills the space with life, leaving no room for harmful intrusions. The night, though dark and long, is not feared. It is understood. Its dangers are known, and the protections against them are in place. The family rests, secure in the knowledge that they have done what is necessary, both practically and spiritually, to ensure their survival until morning. The transition from sleep to wakefulness is not uniform across the household. It occurs in stages, spreading gradually through the room as the warmth from the morning fire reaches different areas. The children wake first after the fire tender. Their sleep is lighter in the early morning hours. Their bodies are tuned to the growing warmth and the sounds of activity. A child opens their eyes in the darkness, still nearly complete despite the faint glow from the firebox. They lie still for a moment, listening to the crackle of the fire, feeling the temperature beginning to rise. The child does not immediately throw off their covering. The reindeer hide is warm, familiar. The air outside it is cooler. They wait, allowing their body to adjust to the idea of movement, to the transition from the stillness of sleep to the activity of day. Other children begin to stir. A murmur passes between siblings sharing a platform. The sounds are soft, barely audible. They are aware that others are still sleeping and maintain a quiet that is instinctive, learned from years of sharing this single room. The adults wake more slowly. Their sleep has been deeper in the final hours before dawn, after the coldest period passed and the fire tender began his work. They hear the children stirring, register the warmth spreading through the room, and gradually surface from sleep. The mother is often next to rise after the children. Her responsibilities begin early. Water must be heated for washing and for tea, food must be prepared, The routines of the day must begin, and she's central to many of them. She sits up on her platform, the reindeer hide falling from her shoulders. The air is cool against her face and hands. She reaches for additional clothing, a thicker outer layer, a shawl, and wraps herself before standing. The floor is warmer than it was during the night, but still cool to the touch. She moves toward the stove, where the fire tender is adding larger logs to the established fire. They exchange no words. The morning routine is familiar, practiced thousands of times. Each knows what the other will do. She retrieves a metal pot from storage, fills it with snow that was brought inside the previous evening, and has since melted into water. She places the pot on the top of the pechka, where it will heat as the stove continues to warm. The elderly members of the household wake last. They have slept more deeply through the final hours, their bodies requiring extended rest. When they do wake, they remain on their platforms for some time, allowing circulation to improve, allowing joints to loosen. The grandfather, the fire tender, is already awake and active, but the grandmother may remain resting on the palati. The warmth of the stove beneath her is comforting, and there is no urgency. The household will function whether she rises immediately or takes her time. As the room warms, the ice windows begin to show faint light. The sun has not yet risen, but the sky is beginning its slow transition from black to deep blue. This light is pale, weak, but it signals the approach of day. The father rises, moving to check the door seals and the condition of the entryway. Snow may have accumulated near the door during the night, blown by wind or falling from the roof. If the door is blocked, it must be cleared before anyone can exit. He opens the door carefully, just a crack. Cold air rushes in, sharp and immediate. He assesses the exterior conditions quickly, then closes the door. The brief intrusion of cold is noticeable, but not catastrophic. The room is warm enough to absorb it without significant temperature loss. The children begin to emerge from under their hides. They dress in their day layers, adding the middle and outer garments that were removed before sleep. The process is practiced, efficient. They know which layers go in which order, how to fasten ties and closures without assistance. Their movements are still slow, their bodies not yet fully alert. They move to the warmth of the stove gathering near it, allowing the heat to complete the waking process. Their breath is visible in the cooler air away from the fire, faint clouds that dissipate quickly. The pot of water on the stove begins to steam. The mother tests it with her finger, judges it warm enough, and pours portions into smaller cups. She adds dried herbs, gathered and preserved from the brief summer, creating a simple tea. The tea is not sweet. Sugar is scarce and reserved for special occasions. The flavour is earthy, slightly bitter, but warming. The tea is distributed to the family members. The children receive smaller portions, the adults receive more. The act of drinking something warm begins the internal warming process, the liquid radiating heat from the stomach outward. The father prepares to go outside to the Khoton. The animals must be tended, fed, watered. This cannot be delayed. He dresses in his full outdoor gear, multiple layers, the heavy outer coat of reindeer hide, the unti boots, the mittens, the hat with ear flaps. Before opening the door, he ensures that everything that might be needed is within reach. The bucket for carrying warm water to the animals, the stored hay and grain for feeding, the tools for mucking out the straw if necessary. Efficiency is critical. The less time spent outside, the less heat lost from the body. He opens the door and steps through quickly, closing it behind him. The family inside feels the brief rush of cold, then the door is sealed again, and the room begins to recover its warmth. Outside, the transition is immediate and severe. The father's breath freezes in the air before him. The cold penetrates his outer layers within seconds, finding any gap, any imperfection in the sealing of his clothing. He moves deliberately toward the Khoton, his steps careful on the hard snow. Inside the balagan, the morning continues to unfold. The children, now warmed by the tea and the proximity to the stove, begin small tasks. One gathers the furs and hides from the sleeping platforms, shaking them to remove any dust or debris. Another checks the firewood supply, ensuring there is enough for the day. The mother begins food preparation. Breakfast will be simple. Boiled grain if available, mixed with fat. Strips of dried meat warmed by the fire. The same stroganina, frozen shavings of fish or horse meat, that was eaten the night before. The diet does not vary much, but it is adequate, providing the calories and nutrients necessary for the day ahead. The grandmother, now awake, sits on the edge of the poladi. She does not yet step down. She's in no rush. She watches the activity in the room, offering occasional guidance to the children, correcting technique when needed. Her presence is teaching, even when she's not actively instructing. The light from the ice windows grows gradually stronger. The room is no longer dependent solely on the glow of the fire for illumination. Objects become visible in their detail, the texture of the log walls, the grain of the wooden platforms, the patterns in the woven mats. The father returns from the Khoton, opening the door and stepping inside quickly. He brings with him a rush of cold air and the smell of the animals, hay, manure, the musk of cattle. He closes the door firmly and begins removing his outer layers. His face is red from the cold, his beard coated with frost from his breath. He moves to the stove to warm himself, his hands extended toward the heat. The circulation returns to his fingers with a tingling sensation that is uncomfortable but necessary. He reports on the condition of the animals. They are well. They have eaten. The temperature in the Khoton is acceptable. There are no problems. The household receives this information without comment. It is what is expected. The confirmation that the system is functioning. Breakfast is ready. The family gathers around the stove to eat. There are no chairs, no table. They sit on the floor or on the edges of the sleeping platforms, holding their portions in their hands or in simple wooden bowls. The meal is eaten in relative silence. Conversation is minimal. The focus is on eating, on consuming the food that will fuel the body for the coming hours. The food is not elaborate, but it is hot, and the warmth of it is as valuable as the nutrition. As they eat, the daylight continues to strengthen. The sun, still below the horizon, sends its light upward, illuminating the sky. The room brightens incrementally, the ice windows allowing pale blue light to filter through. The day has begun. The night has passed. The family has survived another cycle of cold and darkness. The routines that carried them through will carry them forward. There is no celebration, no acknowledgement of achievement. It is simply the way of winter. The fire burns, the stove radiates, the family eats, and outside, the cold remains, patient and constant, waiting for the next night.